Welcome to episode 80 of Fascinating, a Star Trek podcast. The series wrap-up.
In this week's episode, we look back on all 3 seasons to pick out our favourite moments, characters and episodes, as well as some of the things we didn't enjoy so much. We'll be answering listener questions and discussing what might come next. But can we decide before time runs out? Or will we be left without a plan for the future?
I know we've had our disagreements. Maybe they're jokes. I don't know. As Jim says, we're not often sure ourselves sometimes. But what I'm trying to say is...
Doctor, I'm seeking a means of escape. Will you please be brief?
Good evening, Ian. How are you?
I'm not too bad, Jerry. How are you?
I'm okay. We've often had our disagreements.
And I'm often seeking a means of escape.
Well, you have it this week. Almost.
Didn't have to watch anything.
No. So, we have the series wrap-up.
Sort of a mini wrap-up. We've still got movies to come. I think we're going to let folk in on that.
Yeah, the 6 movies and then a complete final big wrap-up.
At the end.
At the very end. So this is just a stop in the way.
Well, it's to... Yes, let folk know where we are. We're going to take a little bit of a break.
We are.
Until January. And we'll come back with the movies, wrap it all up, and then launch the next project somewhere in 2022.
Have we decided on that as yet?
Well, we'll get to that later on, I think.
Okay.
Before we get into any detail, do you have some overall thoughts on the series?
I should say I enjoyed it. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
That's good. Did you expect to enjoy
it? Yeah, I thought I would.
Yeah.
I like a lot of TV. It would have to be really awful for me not to have enjoyed it. Although, going through, the best part of 80 episodes, there has to be something there to sustain it.
Yep.
And it did. It didn't feel like a chore. I mean, the podcasting can sometimes feel like a chore, but watching the episodes was always a pleasure.
Apart from the alternative factor.
Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of awful episodes, but they themselves weren't necessarily not enjoyable to watch, as we've discussed.
Of course. Before we got into this, you had some ideas about some of the characters and some of the setup of the show. So how did the actual experience compare to that?
One of my biggest preconceptions, and I think a lot of people who have not watched the show they've heard about the sort of cheap sets, the low budgets, and in the first few episodes, obviously you notice that, but the characters themselves and the stories quickly made me dismiss these, forget. I was drawn into the story. I didn't play them. I didn't. It wasn't like every week we're going, look how cheap those sets were, or look how ridiculous this is. The foam in the first few episodes, I noticed the foam rocks and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, over a couple of episodes, you forget that and you accept it, and it becomes the suspension of disbelief, I suppose.
I think as well, quite often you would use the same locations for different places, but you wouldn't think. I mean, when you say on the podcast, that's the same location they use in that episode, it's as a point of trivia, not as in, this is unbelievable, it looks just like...
Oh, sure, yeah. If you were just watching this casually, it wouldn't take you out of the episode. We note it, as you say, because it's a point of trivia.
Yeah.
But it wasn't... It didn't detract from the enjoyment of watching.
No.
Also, the relationships, I think, were different to what I thought they would be.
Okay.
Some of the interplay between Spock and McCoy, for example, they were more defined, and there was a consistency in terms of how the characters generally interacted, which was enjoyable.
I think we noted on the podcast that one of our biggest bugbears was when they were written differently from how they'd been established.
Yeah, I think that is my biggest issue with the show. If I have to find fault, is sometimes you think to yourself, you just wouldn't do that. That's not what we've been led to believe he would act like, or she would act like.
Yeah.
That's a minor gripe.
Okay. So overall, in line with the name of the show, were you fascinated?
The short answer is no, but that's not a criticism.
Okay.
If I had watched this as a kid in the 60s, for sure I would have been I can totally understand how someone seeing this for the first time as a youngster, watching it back then, in that context,
yeah.
And you don't necessarily have to have watched it back then. I think if I'd watched it as a kid, in the 80s,
Yeah.
I could quite easily have been fascinated by it. Obviously now, with the TV that you're used to, the sophistication of it, the budgets that they have, the arcs that they have, I think it'd be hard to be fascinated if you're taking the word literally here,
Okay.
because it was more of a time capsule. I think that's the thing. Looking back now, I'm watching this in my 40s for the first time in when did we start this? 2021 was it? 2020 was it really?
No, actually, it was December 19. We brought out the first episode of this.
Okay, so yeah, watching it in that context, as I say, it's a time capsule. It's a throwback. It's
I was actually going to come to that later. There's so much of it I think is indicative of its time.
Of course it is. Yeah.
So TV schedules being one thing, that's why we've got the episodes that are structured in the way that they are, but also some of the attitudes, some of the characterization.
Yeah. We can talk about that a little bit later. But I totally agree. So yeah, not fascinated, but as I say, that's not in any way to denigrate it. I think it's a fantastic show, and I would have been fascinated had I watched it as a kid back then.
Okay, so considering the series as a whole, is there one moment you think maybe epitomizes the show or that stands out for you as a highlight or the highlight?
I wouldn't say there's anything in particular that stands out. I mean, some of my favourite, I suppose, would have been the Tribbles episode.
That was good.
Kirk being buried by them. All the Shatnering that we witnessed over the different episodes. I think the infamous kiss, but for the wrong reasons, or the different reasons from...
We got into that, yeah.
We did
back
get
in the
into that.
episode.
Standing out, McCoy punching a pregnant woman. That certainly was a standout and not expected.
Yeah.
The Plato scenes, pretending you're
yes, the horse riding.
And I think Riley singing still, unfortunately,
still in
stands
your
out
head
for me. But I think there's lots of episodes and scenes that I think I've still got a problem because I've only watched each episode once.
Yeah.
A lot of the times the titles I still haven't connected with what goes on. So as soon as you say, "Oh, that's the one with them in it," that makes more sense. But one pass hasn't been enough for me to memorise each individual episode. I need to have a wee glance on IMDb and go, yeah, I remember it now.
Okay. Now shall we take a look at some of the questions that our listeners have sent us?
Let's crack on.
Okay, on Twitter, Rick asked, if we set Scotty aside, what are your favourite and least favourite romantic pairings?
Yeah, we need to set Scotty aside, don't we?
Yeah, we'll get into a lot of trouble.
I would go for... Well, I've got a few here, I think. Spock and Droxine from the Cloudminders.
Okay.
What about you?
I think Kirk in City on the Edge of Forever.
I've got that as well. I've got 4 pairings here. That would be one of them. Also, Spock and the Romulan Commander.
That was a good one.
And the Enterprise incident, I believe.
Was it This Side of Paradise that you had Spock on the rural colony where he lost control and fell in love with the girl there? That was quite a good one.
It was, yeah. I also have Kirk and Maramani.
Okay, what about McCoy on the Tin Planet?
Is that the one where he was going to come back in...
Yeah, in a year's time.
Yeah, that was good.
Those are some highlights, I think.
Mm-hmm. But none with Scotty. They're all abusive relationships.
Yeah, certainly. Difficult ones, we'll say that.
Physically and mentally.
Rick also asks if there's any antagonist you'd have liked to see return.
Maybe a controversial view. What about Triskelion in The Squire of Gothos? He was an irritant, but...
Hang on, you're confusing two things there. Triskelion was the Gamesters of Triskelion. It was Trelane, or was it Trelane?
Trelane, that's who I'm thinking of
Yes.
then. Sorry, yes, Trelane.
In The Squire of Gothos. Yeah, he was good.
Yeah.
Quite liked him.
Uh-huh.
Some of the big-headed psychic people were quite good as well.
They were, yeah.
And the Empath, and even the ones from the Menagerie, it would have been interesting to see them again.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and the Gorn. I want the Gorn back.
You see, I remember in that episode, that was one of the times where, I wasn't fascinated. And I'm sure, again, it's just an example, if you watched that as a kid in the 60s, maybe that would have been impressive. But watching it now, you go, yeah, it's fun, but it's quaint.
Yeah. Well, that maybe ties into our next question. A good segue. Rob on the website asked what you think is the dumbest episode or concept.
The Way to Eden.
Okay, not the Gorn.
No, I mean, the Gorn, it's just the effects weren't brilliant, and he wasn't that intimidating, but, he was a creature, so wasn't the dumbest.
What about Jack the Ripper raping people?
Well, we can get to that. That was not Jack the Ripper. Yeah, it was ridiculous because it wasn't true. It was Scotty,
Yeah.
as we know.
And they made that clear in the episode, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to go over that again. We will go over it again.
Oh,
It was Scotty.
many times, yeah.
Yeah. No, that was insane.
Okay, we'll move on to Rich on Twitter, who asks whether your perception of what Star Trek is as a concept or a universe or a world or a whatever you want to call it has changed whilst you've been viewing the show or over the course of viewing the show.
I think someone actually asked, sorry, Ian, if it was true that I'd never seen an episode before.
Yeah.
And it is true.
Yeah.
I don't know if my perception could change that much. I didn't have much of a perception.
Okay.
So I'll say yes and no. I think, as I mentioned earlier, the relationships between the characters was not what I expected.
Okay.
I thought it would be more formal, more rigid, more like
Regimented.
Regimented, yeah. So there was that nice sort of banter between them all that carried through it. So I wasn't expecting that. Some were more flawed than I would have guessed. Scotty, as we have mentioned. Kirk himself,
Yeah.
I think.
Well, you said, especially back in season 1, you pointed out a lot of his bad decision making.
Well, that's the thing. I'm not sure how much actually that was meant to be, how much that was written, or how much it's just us looking at it now.
Yeah, I suppose.
Because I think some of the decisions they think are good in the show, and we're not necessarily in agreement with that.
Sure.
But yeah, so the flaw in the characters, many of the plots were what I would have expected from a science fiction Star Trek. However, others were not. And in fact, some of my favourite ones, when it wasn't set in space or on a spaceship or with aliens and monsters.
Some whatever set they had.
Whatever set they had. And I think actually, we'll probably go on to that. Some of my favourite episodes were those ones there. So yeah, I think it was more varied and a bit more, there's a bit more depth to it than what I would have thought.
Great. We've got a few questions from Brian on Twitter. First of all, he wants to ask whether you think the lack of an arc in the storytelling was problematic and whether the self-contained episodes were less satisfying than a modern television show.
I don't think it was a problem, but as we've mentioned during the episodes, I think the show could have been more expansive. It could have benefited.
It would have had richness, wouldn't it?
It certainly would have, yeah. So, yeah, not a problem. But these days you would... Now, I suppose it's a question. I've not watched any of the more modern variants. Do they address that? Do they have arcs in Next Generation and...
A little bit in Next Generation, a lot more in Deep Space Nine, which is really the one of the forerunners on network television for that sort of storytelling.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Voyager, you had the sort of series-long arc of their entire journey, but there weren't so many. It was much more shorter, punchier, 2 or 3 episodes here and there.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing as well. It's not even a case of requiring a full season or show-long arc.
Yeah.
It would have been nice if there wasn't a reset basically after every episode.
Sure.
You could have had a 2 or 3 episode run, yeah.
I mean, the more recent ones, Picard and Discovery, are like each season is a story.
Yeah.
And different elements occur through to it. It's one basic story for the entire season.
But I think you mentioned it, and we've discussed it before. That wasn't how TV was made back
Yeah,
then.
because if you miss an episode, you weren't going to see it for 2 years or whatever it was.
Precisely. So it had to be self-contained so that an audience would.
Indeed. Brian also asks what you make of the trope where whenever they beam down anywhere, they would lose communications.
Totally understandable, and we see it. We've seen it in the last sort of 10, 20 years. They've had the same issues with mobile phones, where they've got to come up with some plot device to
get rid of the easy out.
Yeah. So I thought they handled it perfectly well.
And he wants to know your thoughts, Brian, again, on the Takei Shatner feud. But you've kind of touched on that already, haven't you?
Yeah, I think Takei comes out quite bitter. I think William Shatner, for all his faults, has held his hands up to some of his behaviours, apologised if he offended anyone, and has tried to make amends. Takei doesn't. It's not a good look for him. He's constantly sniping, and it makes him look as if that's all he has. Shatner's had a full and varied career, and is still to this day hugely popular and is involved in all sorts of things. Takei, it almost seems like that's all he's got, and if it wasn't for that, he'd have nothing else. So he's just using that as a means of keeping himself.
Although I think away from talking about William Shatner, George Takei is very popular with Star Trek fans on his own
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure he is. Yeah. Did Brian not also want to mention? He says something. I mean, I don't really understand it myself, but he says, "Up the buddies, come on, the buddies," something like that.
Yeah, I think he is. I don't understand it either, but it seems to be his
So
thing.
there you go. Yeah, but he asked us to say, "Up the buddies." Yeah, come on, Jim Goodwin. Was that what he said?
Yeah,
Okay.
a hero.
Sure. I'm sure that means something too. So there you go, Brian. Up the buddies.
We'll go with one more question from the audience. Jim on Twitter asks, how different you think the show would have been if the original pilot had been picked up and Pike had been the captain of the Enterprise?
Yeah, obviously, clearly, massively different. I think that Shatner's charisma, to a certain extent, carried the show. I think if someone more straight laced, less hammy, even, yeah, there wouldn't have been that same level of engagement for me. Certainly, I think watching Shatner week in week out was one of the highlights.
Yeah, there's so many science fiction shows of the era with nondescript captains. Without wanting to be rude about Jeffrey Hunter or his work on the pilot, it's just it wasn't as standout an appearance as we got from William Shatner as Kirk.
Yeah.
And one more question I think a number of folk asked is just the basic, what was your favourite or your favourite episodes?
Yeah. Some that stand out would be the Mud episodes for me.
Okay.
Obviously, City on the Edge of Forever, I think, was brilliant. Space Seed,
Yep, it's a good one.
Mirror Mirror.
Yep.
Wolf in the Fold.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Piece of the Action, I say the gangster one. I really liked that.
That's a good episode.
The Ultimate Computer.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Assignment Earth
That was quite good fun.
with Gary Seven.
Yeah, you like Gary Seven.
Yeah, it was good. Spectre of the Gun, I liked the old Western setting. And a controversial one, Plato's Stepchildren.
Okay.
It is the type of episode that if it was on I would watch because it's fun and ridiculous and silly and
Yeah. I mean, we add a few. Enemy Within I quite enjoyed.
okay.
I like the Man Trap, the first episode. It's
Yep.
a good one. I really like the one, I know it's not that popular, with the Garth of Azar in the prison.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Doesn't matter. Everyone knows. And it'll come to me as soon as I move on to something else. Okay, so if we look back over to the first podcast we did for this show, we talked to you about some things. We've touched on one or two of them, but let's dig a little bit deeper. One of the things you said you recognised about the show before watching the episodes was the Klingons. You'd heard of the Klingons, so how did they meet or fail to meet your expectations?
Visually, not what I expected. We've discussed this as well. I think of them as the big elephant man, the John Merrick heads.
Okay, well, that's still to come in the movies. It's okay.
Yeah, so I believe they were also far less prominent than what I had thought they would be. In my mind, they would be in 50% of the episodes, maybe more.
Yeah, they were only maybe in 5, 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you enjoy any of the other enemy species or even friendly species?
Obvious ones, the Klingons and the Romulans were worthy adversaries. I think they're the ones that there's some sort of threat there.
Yeah.
And as mentioned, I wouldn't necessarily call them an adversary, but Mudd and Trelane.
Okay. I quite liked learning more about the Vulcans when we went back with Spock at the start of season 2.
Yeah.
And I like the pig-faced men.
They were good, yeah.
Your favourite?
Quite creepy.
Yeah.
And what's the other one with the little blue
The Andorians.
Andorians? Yeah, they're pretty cool.
If you like them, you should watch Star Trek Enterprise. They're quite prominent in that series.
Don't like them that much.
Okay. I was going to ask next, are there any you'd like to learn more about, but no is obviously the answer. You're not going to watch another show about them. So, okay, we discussed, actually, that's quite good. When we discussed in the first show your notion of what Starfleet and the Federation were, and you, by the middle of season 3, held quite a negative view of both. Is that still your position?
Yeah, I'm trying to be fair here. They're doing a job and they have to balance exploration and policing against the rights and lifestyles and of other civilizations.
Yeah.
And I think that is it's a pretty tough line to walk. And I think they get it mostly right. They don't seem too authoritarian, but there are at times when you think it's a little bit imperialistic, a little bit empire building, or swatting away other peoples for their own advancement.
Yeah, we need these minerals. I don't care what's happening to you. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And I think we see it represented in how the Enterprise and how Kirk and the crew act when they get down there. We said this, especially at the start, they seem to be very much a case of, if you're not doing this right, you're not doing civilization right.
Yeah.
What do you mean you don't want to constantly improve and develop technology? You can't just be happy lying
McCoy
about
would say
there.
that a lot. Yeah, they're not really living. They're just stagnating.
Yeah, that didn't seem to be as prominent a message in the sort of second and the third season. I think they got away from that, which was good because
Toned it down, yeah.
they had to tone that down. It wasn't a great look.
Another thing we looked at was the connection to the 60s. We talked about this briefly 10 minutes ago. So how deeply embedded in its time do you think the show is?
Very much so, yeah, without a doubt. In many ways, it was sexist and misogynistic.
Yeah.
But on the positive side, I think that it reflected the optimism of the space race and the technological advancements that the 60s had.
Yeah.
And overall, I think it put forward a very progressive message.
Yeah, I think they were aiming for a utopian future.
Sure. Even though issues, it was very issue and politically led, which again I wasn't expecting. There was a deeper political message in episodes and shows, which to answer one of the previous questions, I didn't expect. They weren't always put forward in the most delicate and considerate fashion. Sometimes it was a little bit cack-handed, but that's because it was off its time, and we shouldn't judge TV by today's standards.
That's what we do with all our other podcasts.
Yeah, we judge it, but we accept that that's where they were.
Yeah, we're not saying they shouldn't have done it. It's just this is how it now sits.
Yeah, and I think that is the difference. If you can see that the shows are actually trying, they're not doing it how we would do it now, and they don't. Everyone's built all the knowledge and understanding, and the progress is built upon what has been learnt over time. Some shows, if you look back and you think, you know what, they're mean spirited, and they're not trying to be anything more than that. And I think this did it. Its heart was in the right place.
Okay. Which was your favourite sex robot?
Andrea. We've had a lot to choose from, but Andrea is my first love.
Yeah, stuck on her.
I'm stuck on her. I can't get by her. Yeah, she's. Yep. If you could buy one these days.
Were you surprised how many sex robots appeared in the show?
Well, that's another thing, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, literally there must have been about 5 or 6 sex robots.
Or at least that's 2 a season.
Yeah. I did not think that when we started this podcast that would be a recurring topic of discussion, sex robots and who was the hottest. So, but again, it's not negative. I'm quite happy to do that.
Of course.
It was, a surprise.
Any other aspects of the show that stood out to you?
Just what I mentioned, the fact that it was quite political and issue driven, that surprised me in a good way. I thought it would be more about just monsters and spacemen and all that sort of malarkey. So the fact that it had these progressive and positive themes running through it was nice.
Talking of monsters, any favourite monsters? Salt monsters, cloud monsters, steam monsters.
The pizza one.
Oh, the Devil in the Dark. Yeah, it was good. I enjoy that.
Uh-huh.
You like it better than Rocky? Its fellow silicon-based life form.
Yeah, I didn't like Rocky.
Okay, fair enough. Neither did I.
And Big Lurch, he was good.
Yeah, in the Andrea episode.
Yes.
Another good episode.
Yeah.
What Are Little Girls Made Of? Do you think any of these characters could have sustained their own spin-off show?
Yeah, 3 that stood out for me. Obviously, you're talking about out with the crew, because I think Spock could have had his own show.
Yeah.
Not sure about any of the other ones.
George Takei thinks there should have been a Captain Sulu show.
No, there shouldn't have been. No, that would have been stupid. It would have been absolute garbage.
He only had 3 lines a season.
Yeah, no, there was nothing to him to suggest that he wanted his own show.
What were your 3?
Spock from the crew, and as mentioned, I think Harry Mudd could have pulled it off. We could have went on Mudd's adventures. Gary Seven, I think we discussed it.
That was intended to be a backdoor pilot, yeah.
Yeah, so I could have seen, those 3, yeah.
Okay. Do you have any favourite moment?
Sorry, what about yourself?
In terms of spin-offs?
Yeah.
I'd quite like to see a McCoy show where he goes around telling folk that he's not qualified to help them with their problems. He's just a doctor. And Doctor Mbenga. He would be good if he had a show just going around curing Vulcans.
Sure.
And maybe he could have Chapel as a sidekick.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing, that I said Spock, but I could see Spock and McCoy being a double act.
Yeah. That would be quite good.
Uh-huh.
And Apollo is going with his big green hand grabbing things.
Fair enough.
Do you have a favourite moment of Shatnering from the series?
The episodes I think that stood out would have been the Plato's Stepchildren,
Okay.
Turnabout Intruder we had recently,
Yeah.
Whom Gods Destroy.
Well, that's the one I couldn't remember the name of,
There you go.
with Garth of Izar.
Yeah, and the Enterprise incident.
Okay. I quite liked him in The Enemy Within and Mirror Mirror.
Yes,
I also liked Spock in Mirror Mirror.
was that the one with the
his
goatee?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was very good.
Do you have any notion to watch any of the spin-offs?
I'd be quite happy to watch some of them casually. I would start with Generation. I'm not the type of person that would. I like everything a lot about OCD when it comes to that.
You have to watch them in order.
I'd have to watch them.
Then Deep Space Nine lines up with season 5 of The Next Generation. You have to then start alternating.
No, that's not happening.
And then Voyager comes in after season 7 and alternates with Deep Space Nine.
I think I've seen one episode of Generation.
Next Generation.
Next Generation. The one, I believe there's a Sherlock Holmes themed one.
Yes, there is.
Now, I watched that when I was a kid because I was a big Sherlock, and I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan, so that looked quite good to me. So yeah, no, I'd be more than happy. I mean, I've got, is it on? What is it? Netflix?
It's on Netflix at the moment.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be going to Paramount Plus in due course. That's launching in the UK next year.
Yeah, but it's the type of thing that I could probably throw on in the background and watch it.
First couple of seasons are not great, but it's worth watching them and then watching William Shatner's documentary Chaos on the Bridge that explains why they weren't great.
Right.
And then from season 3.
Okay, but you've put me off there. The first, so you're going to ask me to watch 2 seasons of a show that's not great just so that I can hear
Yeah,
William
I mean,
Shatner's.
The last
You're
episode,
not selling it to me here.
the last episode of season 2 is just a clip show.
Right, I might not watch
Just
it.
start of season 3, it'll be absolutely fine.
You've unsold me.
Okay, you should watch Lower Decks.
What's that?
It's the animated one that came out last year. It's only done 20 episodes, but some great original series references in it.
Okay.
Okay, what we're doing next?
Well, what are we doing next?
We've had lots of suggestions for what to cover. Over 50 different shows were suggested by people on
Okay.
various platforms.
Are there any we did look through them, and we thank everyone for their suggestions.
We do.
And lots of the shows that came up, I'd be more than happy. They're shows that we like, shows that we enjoy watching, but they don't quite meet the criteria.
There's some that I just wouldn't watch because they sound terrible.
Okay, well, that's fair enough. Yeah, that's the thing. If we don't, it's going to be hard to do something for the best part of 2 years if you
Yeah, if you're
don't-
not into it, yeah.
yeah, or not even into the possibility of it.
Yeah. So 7 different shows got multiple votes.
Oh, okay,
I can give you them in no particular order.
go for it. Do it in alphabetical order, please.
No,
Okay.
no particular order.
Right.
So The Office UK, which is one that you like the idea of, I believe.
Yeah.
The Prisoner, which has got a good Columbo connection.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's that many episodes of it.
Not sure.
Battlestar Galactica, I'm not sure whether they mean the new one or the old one, or both.
That's the one with face in it, isn't it?
No, that's the A-Team.
Huh.
Red Dwarf, I don't know if again they mean the revival or the original or both.
They mean the original, no doubt.
It's all the same people, it's probably more considered one thing.
Okay.
Death in Paradise,
Oh yeah, that's been mentioned a few times.
Quantum Leap,
Ah, okay.
and Star Trek The Next Generation, which is a no from you.
That doesn't meet one of the main criteria. I'm not doing it for 4 years. I'm sorry.
Well, you're not committing at this stage to 4 years.
Not right now. No. Do we have a winner? What are we going to do?
Well, it's a good question. Do any of those names stand out to you?
Yeah, obviously The Office UK, and I would say that. What's your thoughts on Quantum Leap?
I enjoyed Quantum Leap in the 90s.
I did. Now, it's a show that I've not watched from start to finish. I've probably not seen every episode, but I didn't watch it in order. I've probably seen, I would say, 60-70% of them.
I think what I will have seen is the last couple of seasons, because I probably just watched it from when I started watching
Right. No, I'm
it.
the opposite. I've probably seen more of the first few seasons. I've not seen the last episode.
Okay, so we're not experts.
We're not. And I had a quick look, actually. There is a fairly big Quantum Leap podcast already, but
They finished.
they've finished and they did a lot of interviews and things like that, which we won't be doing.
No, because nobody would want to talk to us
No.
in case we got good answers from them.
Hmm.
So you think we could do that?
Yeah, I think we could. What do you guys think? Quantum Leap, how would that feel? The only other suggestion I've got is that we do a quick Office UK first and then do Quantum Leap. I said last week, a palate cleanser, between one sci-fi show to the next. Do we stick in a...
But is The Office UK not just like one joke?
No. It's not normally. I would suggest we stay away from comedy, which is again
We've struggled with comedy in the past.
Yeah, it's not the easiest thing to podcast on, which is why I read The Wharf and The Young Ones. With those have been suggestions, but I just don't feel that the podcast would be that great. I like the shows, but I don't think we can do a good podcast. The Office is so well written. The characters are so well developed, and they've got such great arcs. And it's not just cracking jokes all the time. They're real sort of personal.
I mean, there must be an Office podcast.
Oh, there will be. Certainly an American Office podcast, yes, for sure. The UK one, there will be. But still.
We've got another wrap-up show to come, so maybe folk could ping us their ideas between now and then.
Okay, so let's say this, right? We definitely do Quantum Leap.
Okay.
The question is, do we stick in The Office UK in between? Now, that only has 3 seasons of 6 episodes. We've got 18 episodes.
Specials.
And then I think there's maybe 3 specials. So we're only talking
6 months.
20 odd weeks.
Yeah.
Why don't you guys let us know?
Yeah, give us your thoughts. I mean, that probably puts Quantum Leap back about a year.
No.
Because we're not going to start immediately, and then we won't want to start immediately after that.
We're going to start in January. No,
we're doing the Star Trek movies in January.
Oh, so we are, yeah. Yeah, we're probably not going to get around to the new show until when? April?
Yeah. And then that takes you to October, and then, so yeah, by the time you get into Quantum Leap, it'll be about a year from now.
Okay.
So if we do it that way, that's how it would break down.
Okay, so give us your thoughts, guys. Do we go straight to Quantum Leap, or do we have The Office UK for 20 odd episodes prior to that? Let us know.
Okay. I think all that's really left to do is to thank everyone for sticking with us through 79 episodes. I look forward to speaking to you all again on the movie episodes early next year.
Yeah, I echo that. Thank you very much to all the listeners, all those who have interacted with us as well. It makes it all. I've said before, if it wasn't for listeners and people interacting, we wouldn't do it. We would just have a chat ourselves.
Yes.
No point in recording it. It'd be silly.
Anyway, shall we see folk in a couple of months? In about a month's time.
Until then.
Cheerio.
Bye bye.